Researchers took bird flu and manipulated it to make it easier to transmit between humans.
Fauci was drawn into a scandal with a scientist named Fouchier, who used gain-of-function to make bird flu airborne in mammals. This had never been done before.
We already did everything we can to protect the virus from getting out of our facilities, and well, I will leave it with that for now.
You have said to me in a phone interview that this was, quote, the doomsday virus.
There was an accident and could have infected humans.
I think that what we need to make sure is that we don't mix apples and oranges.
People have mixed opinions, but if it had leaked, the virus could have killed like 20 to 50% of the world's population.
People playing God, man. People with God complexes.
But instead of being punished for doing this work and putting the entire world's population at risk by doing this work, they were celebrated.
Hey there, friends. Welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Yanasa TV. Real quick, our Defend the Right to Farm hats have finally come in. This is the last time I'm doing a pre-order on these. I ordered some extra this time. We've got about 10 or 15 extra on there. As soon as those sell, I'll probably reorder some and then just wait for them to come in. I will say that they were worth the wait. They came out really nice this time, but I've decided I have no control over people making stuff for us, and sometimes it takes longer than expected. All right, so have you guys seen the cover of The Economist magazine for 2025 this year? You know, a lot of people say that the elites tell us what they're going to do before they do it, and this cover is very ominous. But I believe that, because realistically, almost every time they do something, they tell us about it ahead of time. You guys remember the Big C at Johns Hopkins University? It's not like a tinfoil hat thing. This is how it goes. This actually happens. Anyway, today I wanted to talk a little bit about the bird flu because egg prices are at all-time highs. The wholesale national average has reached $5.57. It's not quite that high here where I am, but there are some places around this country where it's much higher. For example, it's over $8 for a dozen in California, and that's because of their cage-free egg laws. Michigan, you're right behind them because at the beginning of the year, you're gonna start having your cage-free egg law roll out. So egg prices are up 150% year over year. For such an important food, this food packs a punch of nutrients and protein and has always been traditionally pretty affordable until now, and the prices are going through the roof. Why? A lot of it has to do with bird flu. Since 2022, over 123 million birds have had to be euthanized due to bird flu. The USDA has recently lowered its egg production forecasts due to the current outbreak of bird flu, which has been impacting some pretty major egg producers across the United States. And it seems as though this bird flu, just when we think it's kind of starting to sneak its way out the door, it suddenly comes back with a vengeance each time. Last time it came back, it started impacting cows. Now, at this point in time, we've got cows infected, cats infected. You've probably all heard about the raw milk recall in California. Yeah, that's a great company. I think it could have happened to anybody, but no humans were impacted by that. There's still no cases of humans that I know of getting bird flu from raw milk, but I think it was in their pet milk. A couple cats got infected. There have been human cases of bird flu. Most of them have been mild up until now. A man in Louisiana, granted he's over the age of 65, has gotten the bird flu. H5N1 is not a virus to not take seriously. It has a 30 to 60% kill rate in human populations. So if it gets into the human population, it could be absolutely detrimental. It also impacts a lot of mammals and other animals when it gets into their populations pretty bad. It is a very serious virus. So some people have asked me, what does Dr. Fauci have to do with this? Is this true? Does he have anything to do with it at all? And unfortunately, a lot of times I've been quiet on this channel, and I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to replay for you guys something about H5N1 that I put out probably well over a year ago now, where I talked about how highly unusual this bird flu actually was to begin with. Okay, so let's talk about what makes this bird flu, in my perspective, not just my perspective, but many scientists who study it, extremely unusual. Number one, the bird flu is normal numbers out of the water. We're blowing those numbers out of the water, and it's global. I mean, this is a global thing. They said in Japan that bird flu has been spreading like wildfire. I mean, in the UK, they're calling it an extinction level event. So what we're seeing here in the US it doesn't even compare to what we're seeing globally. Bird flu generally starts with waterfowl, and it festers in waterfowl. It generally doesn't even kill waterfowl, and that's how it spreads. But what we've been seeing with this bird flu is that it's actually been killing waterfowl. It's been entering more species than any other bird flu that we've ever seen. So this new strain of HPAI has spread across the globe more so than any other strain that we've seen. It's been found in New Zealand, Venezuela, Portugal, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. So this strain has been spreading through South America fairly quickly. Europe, Japan, Asia, the United States. This is a global event. This is a pretty massive ordeal right now. And they're referring to it as a new strain. So, you know, we hear a lot of people talk about new strains of things. Everything seems to be somewhat of a new strain, but we haven't seen a strain necessarily this powerful, and that's the point of it. It is impacting waterfowl in a way that it normally wouldn't impact them. The Netherlands, it actually shut down, they had to cull 6 million birds this past year. Of course, you know, that does, you know, I could see how people would think that that has more to do with them trying to shut down 3,000 farmers. And don't get me started on that. They are shutting them down. They basically said, you sell to us or we're going to force you to sell to us. I feel like that's a whole other video of just, I don't know. I don't understand these food hubs and how they're supposed to work or how they're supposed to benefit anybody. But the Netherlands, shutting down farmers in the Netherlands is just adding to global food insecurity, since the Netherlands is the largest producer of meat and dairy in Europe. I'm really not sure if people have really wrapped their brain around that one or what's going on there. But the other food hub that I can think of, and when I'm talking about food hubs, I'm talking about these new that group food hubs, was Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka's, anyway, back to the bird flu. According to the Hakai magazine of coastal sciences and societies, seabirds shouldn't die from the flu. The type of influenza virus that infects birds, known as influenza A or bird flu, is traditionally mild. Most birds don't show any sign of sickness. Its natural habitat is within digestive systems of seabirds and waterfowl. That's its natural habitat, such as ducks and geese. It spreads through bodily fluids and fecal matter in the water. It's a natural part of wetland and coastal ecosystems. But this outbreak has killed thousands of seabirds. It's impacted 80 different species of birds. It has also survived through the summer, a season usually free from influenza in the northern hemisphere, and it jumps into mammals, an entirely new host. And that's true. There was recently a bird flu outbreak on a mink farm in Spain. So the bird flu has obviously been able to, this particular strain, which is an unusual strain, as you just heard, this particular strain has been able to jump into mammals and infect mink farms. It has also been able to jump into humans. Now, it's very rare that you see a bird flu strain having the ability to impact mammals and humans. But this particular strain has not only infected an entire mink farm, which are mammals, but it has actually killed a woman in her 30s in China. On December 2nd, it killed a 38-year-old woman in China. It shouldn't surprise you, given this information, that the Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Modeling, SPIM, is understood to be standing ready to produce forecasts on the impact of bird flu on humans. SPIM is a subcommittee of the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergency, SAGE, which has provided recommendations to the government throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. A scientific advisor to the government said there is a lot going on behind the scenes gearing up for any possible avian flu issues. A lot. They're planning on this. The wheels are spinning already. Official figures from World Health Organization show there have been 868 cases of human infection with the avian flu virus over the past 20 years. While variants of the virus had a mortality rate in people of around 60%, the current variant is understood to have a lower rate of between 20% and 40%. But this compares to a death rate during the peak of COVID-19 infections of just 2%. Okay, so at the risk of being censored, and I appreciate, you guys shopping at places like Yanasa Trading Co. for hats and stuff, that's really kind of helping us when it comes to, the potential of being censored. And so I'm going to get into a little more into this topic than I have in the past, because I think it's important. And I'm not pointing fingers necessarily at Dr. Fauci in many ways. I kind of feel like he's the perfect fallout person, the perfect one to blame, America's number one hated person, right? The world's number one hated person. And I think it's important when I get into this to recognize how many people knew about the H5N1 virus and its potential, and how many countries knew about it, how many people had access to this information. And the same thing with the COVID vaccine, with the big C. Anything can happen, but there's going to be a fallout guy. There's going to be a fallout guy. I don't think he acted alone, nor, well, I don't know. I think you have to be literally insane to do this type of stuff. I will also just throw in here real quick that Dr. Fauci, although he has not actually been charged with any crimes, the Biden administration has considered pardoning Dr. Fauci for his past acts.
Well, we begin here with a new report that the Biden White House is considering, listen to this, preemptive pardons before President-elect Trump takes office. Now, this is according to Politico. White House officials are weighing handing out blanket pardons, to those in, quote, Trump's crosshairs, in their words. Among those who could receive them are former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, Senator-elect Adam Schiff, and Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, there's no evidence any of these individuals have requested a pardon or if they know these discussions have been going on. And Politico reports that the president himself has not been brought into the broader pardon discussion yet. It is his aides having these talks. And Fox News has reached out to the White House, Cheney, Fauci, and Schiff for comment, but they have not responded to Fox directly on those requests just yet.
Which, if he didn't commit any crimes, I don't know why you would need a pardon. Either way, I think he's just a fallout guy. And I think that by pardoning him and protecting him, they're protecting something else. Okay, so I'm going to go back in time to 2011. I'm going to give you, and well, actually, this timeline was written in 2012, but the timeline goes back into 2011. So Gaiman Bennett of the Center for Biological Futures, Basic Sciences of Hutchinson University wrote a rather interesting timeline of events around H5N1 and the studies, the effectiveness of the studies. I mean, in 2011, they had figured out how to do this, how to make H5N1 transmissible between humans, between mammals of all kinds. And just imagine this. This is one of the most dangerous viruses in the world. Back in 2011, they figured out how to make it transmissible between mammals, between humans. This is a study that was funded in part by the United States government, Dr. Fauci, and the Biden administration, or not the Biden, sorry, the Obama administration, which Biden was a part of. Now, as you all know, it's no longer a secret where the big C came from, right? Everybody thought it was, there were a lot of us that had put out information fairly early on that was fairly accurate information about a lab leak. A lot of that was censored because they didn't want you to know where it came from. But at this point in time, I think everybody has come to the same conclusion, that the big C most likely came from a leak in the Wuhan lab. That's the most likely scenario. It's the most likely scenario that the government has come up with, that everybody else has come up with. So I think we can stop, wondering about that. And that happened to come from research that was being done on how to make a coronavirus more deadly to humans. This is the type of stuff what's twisted about these people who create this stuff. I can't get my mind wrapped around why you would even do the research. But it happened, and it escaped from the lab. How it escaped from the lab, nobody really knows. All we know are the people who funded it, who are the people who are crazy enough to invest in this type of thing. And again, that was another thing that was funded under Dr. Fauci under the Obama administration. These deadly viruses are horrific, okay? So let's talk about Gaiman's report, and I'm going to put a link to this timeline down below because there's a lot of information in this timeline. His report is more or less going back and forth between all of the conversations that happened because these scientists, after creating this new deadly version of the H5N1, wanted to publish their information. And so there was a lot of back and forth between government agencies on whether or not it should be published at all. But the key things I want to focus on here are, who had knowledge of this early on and where are we today? So on September 2011, researchers from the Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, led by Ron Fouchier, announced that they had successfully engineered a mutant form of influenza H5N1, avian influenza, that is transmissible by respiratory route between mammals. And they did this with ferrets. Do you remember when all of the ferrets in one area had seemingly got infected with H5N1? They said, well, it must be because they're eating the dead birds. Well, could it have been that all of those ferrets contracted H5N1 from one ferret that ate the bird? Because this particular strain of H5N1 was transmissible between mammals. There have been questions all along this current phase of bird flu, this unusual phase of bird flu, on whether or not it's been transmissible. Even when it got into the cattle population, the question was, is this coming from the feed that they're eating, the poop in the feed, or is this transmissible? What we know from this is that the research was done, this virus exists out there since 2011. Given that ferrets' immune response to influenza is considered to be similar to the response in humans, the studies suggest that the engineered H5N1 is likely transmissible human to human as well. The researchers suggest that transmissible flu they had created remained as lethal as the original strain. That's something to be proud of, on which their work had been carried out, a strain estimated to be fatal in 30 to 60% of cases in humans. Several months later, it became widely known that a second research group led by University of Tokyo and University of Wisconsin professor Yashiro Kawaoki, I think I said that right, Kawaoki, similarly had engineered a mammal-to-mammal transmissible form of H5N1. The conduct of the work, the handling of its announcement, and the political turmoil set into motion by the prospect of its publication have raised serious questions about the limits of free inquiry and the regulation of research with dangerous organisms. And that's what I'm talking about. There was a lot of political turmoil over whether or not they should be publishing this information and how they did it. Absolutely not. They shouldn't have been doing it in the first place. Personal opinion, anybody could take this information. Hillary Clinton was at a conference with the WHO and biological weapons, the UN, and she basically said anybody could take this research and turn it into a bioweapon. Same person who's in the administration that's funding this stuff. It has also raised serious questions about the terms under which such research should be organized, justified, and critiqued. It should not be organized or justified in any way. Why are we designing viruses to kill people, folks? Like, why are we doing this? Think about it. If you're the scientist creating this, you have to have in your mind at some point in time, you have to envision, you have to fantasize about the fact of this virus actually getting into the population and killing people. That's sick. These people don't belong in institutions with labs, they belong in institutions with bars. I'll put the link below to this timeline because I think this timeline is important for those of you who want to learn more about it. And like I said, this is more of a discussion of whether or not this information should be released. Fact is that this virus was created and everybody knew about it back in 2011. And anybody who has access to those labs, to that research, could mimic this. So back in 2011, one of the first things on the list is the Center for Disease Control, the CDC. It conducted its regular inspection of the BSL-3 plus virology facilities, and at that time, Ron Fouchier describes as specifically designed for work in the transmissibility of H5N1 by respiratory routes. So the CDC was inspecting this facility back in 2011. The inspection will play a small but important role in the exchange of criticisms, justifications that will characterize the unfolding of events connected with the Fouchier and Yoshihiro group's success in making H5N1 transmissible between mammals. Basically, at this point in time, you have these two guys, two different research groups. CDC is inspecting the labs, and you're going to start seeing where different government agencies try and, debate on whether or not this stuff should be published. I will say that two of the U.S. government agencies, the NIH and the NSABB, both recommended that the research not be published. The WHO wanted it to be published, or at least part of it to be published. Let's just put little hints out there for people to find, right? There's also an article from December 2011, A Flu Risk Worth Taking. And you'd have to subscribe to the Washington Post to read this article, but I highly suggest you do. It was an article written by Dr. Fauci and a couple other scientists, basically explaining why this research was important and trying to justify why they should be creating viruses that kill people. And the thing is, you're creating this virus. So they're not creating an anti-vaccine. Maybe they have one for the virus they created. But if the virus itself, in a natural way, were to evolve to that extent on its own, you'd still have to research that evolution of the virus in order to come up with a vaccine of some sort. So this research really isn't putting us ahead on discovering vaccines or how to deal with it. All it's doing is it's creating this mutant virus. And it would seem as though we're experiencing right now some sort of mutant H5N1 virus that from day one has been highly unusual and adaptive to situations in evolution. And maybe, I don't know the whole research behind this, but maybe they've got to get the virus into the population and let it evolve. Maybe the science, the research, what they put into this has something to do with how the virus evolves. I don't know all the answers to all the questions. The other thing is that we don't know when a new strand is actually entered in. We've heard of different strands of the H5N1 coming into the population. Nobody ever knows where it's going to come from because it's being carried by wild birds across the planet. So nobody can possibly say, well, it originated here. That's one thing about bird flu. We're never going to have an origination point. So here's the thing. Number one, Dr. Fauci's Big C research, you guys know what the Big C is, seemed to escape a lab, causing a global pandemic. Why would anybody else think that some of these other projects wouldn't escape a lab? Like, why is this even a question? It should be a possibility right off the tops of our minds. Simply from a moral perspective, what is the point of developing viruses to harm people? Okay, I've given you my opinion on it. What's your opinion? What's the point of doing this? You can't create a vaccine from it. I think these people must be mad. They've got to be crazy to be doing this stuff in the first place. And I'm not pointing fingers at Fauci. I'm not pointing fingers at any particular person. But what I'm saying is that this information was out there. And just like the other information that was out there, and it came straight from the lab, from what we know, that happened. We can't pretend it didn't happen. It destroyed people's lives. In some cases, it improved people's lives. As odd as that sounds, that it actually kind of had multiple impacts. But it definitely changed the course of the world, okay? Now we have this new situation. The evidence is clear that the research has been done. It's been around since 2011. It's been sitting in a lab. It's been worked on since 2011, perfected since 2011 by mad scientists who think it's okay to create this stuff. Now, who's to say that that couldn't escape? Who's to say that somebody couldn't get their hands on the information? One of these guys was the scientist out of Tokyo. Who's to say that China couldn't get their hands on this information? This is why it's crazy that we even involve ourselves with this from the get-go. Why are we even researching this stuff from the get-go? Because it's kind of like any other time you have a weapon and you're in battle, somebody else can flip that and use it against you. And this is one of the most deadly weapons that's out there. And unfortunately, it's spreading again. Unfortunately, its impact on people is a lot worse than the mild symptoms we were seeing before. And I don't know where any of this is going. I can't tell you exactly, I can't tell you that somebody is involved in it other than funding its creation. But I do think that we need to stop the funding of the creation of this stuff. And I think that people need to realize that these mad science programs are extraordinarily destructive. If there's anything we should have learned with the big C, is that all of these things should have been shut down. Now, there's all sorts of questions around things like Lyme disease. I think that people are starting to wake up and say, they were actually working on Lyme disease in a lab before it escaped out into the environment. Whether it's intentional or by mistake, it's going to happen, which is why people should not be engaged in these types of sciences, these practices. And like I said, the person working on this has to have that vision in their mind. They have to fantasize about this stuff, right? That's sick. Anyway, guys, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on that because I've had some questions. It's becoming a hot topic again. Egg prices are through the roof. I think that if this isn't handled, it could impact beef prices. I think it will definitely at some point in time impact milk. I think, if it spreads further, if it gets into the hog population, that would wreak havoc. And so this is a serious situation that has not gotten under control over the past several years. And it appears to be getting worse again. So pay attention to it. Protect your backyard flocks. That's another thing is the guy in Louisiana had a backyard flock. I've said this from day one, as states like California, who just declared a state of emergency over this stuff, it wouldn't surprise me if they start using their powers to restrict backyard flocks. That would be a very bad thing for those of us who grow our own food, who depend on, subsidizing those high grocery store prices with what we're able to grow and raise on our own. But as states declare states of emergency, that could happen. Either way, I think that this is not going away. I think it's going to intensify before it does. And we should all be a little sharper as to what's going on there. This is as blunt as I've been about it, and I hope maybe you guys have learned something today.